Ayatollah Khomeini declared we're Muslims first, not Persians first. It was an angry Iranian revolution. Now, the Sunni Muslims have a similar group that claim Muslim solidarity. And understand one more thing about the Ayatollah Khomeini. It's not just that we're Muslims first, we are the genuine Muslims. As Shiites, we have an obligation to educate and lead the Muslim world. The Shiite brand is preached by the Ayatollahs in Iran. Look upon other Muslims the way we look upon Jews for Jesus. There was a rally here in town for Israel, and it was co-sponsored by the Reform and Conservative, by the Reconstructionists and the B'nai B'rith. I'm sure your synagogue would take part. It was co-sponsored by Jews for Jesus. Would you guys come? Would you? In Chicago, they canceled a major rally for Israel during the Lebanon War when Jews for Jesus insisted on coming. There were Muslim groups that were coming. Please, we'd love to put them in the front row for the TV cameras. Black church is great. Jews for Jesus? No. Charlatans? No. We draw the line there. That's how the Shiites look upon the Sunnis. Let's talk a minute about the Sunnis. Egypt was the epicenter of the Sunni Muslim world for 1,500 years. The great Muslim seminaries in Cairo were Sophora. That's where theological discipline came from, and final decisions for the whole Muslim world. When does Ramadan start? Check with the guys in Cairo. Cairo ran the Muslim world to the point, and it was a very mellow form of Islam. Jihad's an internal thing, it's fighting with yourself. It was what Bernard Lewis calls accommodation in Islam. Very mellow, very accommodationist, support the government you live in, and it went pretty well. There was a challenge, and by the way, for 1,000 years, those Muslim seminaries were the Lakewood, the Punovich, the Mir of the Muslim world. Muslims from Indonesia to Cordova longed to go and study in those seminaries. And Muslim young ladies throughout the world dreamed to marry young men who studied in those seminaries. They were the apex of the Muslim world. The second half of the 20th century, they were seriously challenged. They were challenged by the Wahhabites, who were an otherwise undistinguished cult in the northeastern quadrant of the Arabian Peninsula you probably never would have heard of, except for two little things. In 1919, they captured the city of Mecca, and their leader, Ibn Saud, in great modesty, renamed most of Arabia after himself, Saudi Arabia. And secondly, in 1937, British geologists discovered the world's largest oil reserves. Saudi Arabia is not a country. It is a giant gas station with a flag. They have between a quarter and a third of this planet's proven oil reserves. And they've used that oil money to preach their fanatical form of Sunni Islam. Put things in context. Michael Oren, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, to the United States, says that Israelis estimate about 90% of the Muslim religious leaders in Israel get their religious decisions from Cairo. About 8% from Mecca, about 2% from Tehran. Put that in context. In Tehran, they permit, it's a mitzvah to be a suicide bomber against a fellow Muslim who's not a Shiite. In Saudi Arabia, you're only allowed to be a suicide bomber against heathens, non-Muslims. In Cairo, the decision is you go to hell if you're a suicide bomber. You will not go to paradise. Forget about those 72 virgins. You're going to end up in hell, wherever that is. That's not a small thing. It's not a small thing that 90% of Israeli Arabs, religious leaders, get their rulings from Cairo. Should Cairo change, things will change dramatically. This might be the biggest change that will come out of Egypt, would be if there was a change. But the Muslim Brotherhood started in Egypt in the 1920s and 1930s. And the Muslim Brotherhood began to preach a radical form of Sunni Islam, not unlike Wahhabite Islam. The term jihad, which had been used as an internal thing, they became an external thing to fight the enemy with jihad, which had not been used since the 9th century. The general suppressed them. Farouk, who was a corrupt, corpulent king, in every sense of the world, is chased out by the generals, and the chief general, Nasser, takes over. And Nasser says, we are Arabs first. He renames Egypt the United Arab Republic. He uses Arab pride to crush the Muslim Brotherhood. The Shah had used Persian pride. The Ayatollah said, no, we're Muslims. Nasser, 20 years earlier, said, no, we're Arabs. Pan-Arabism. After Nasser dies, Sadat takes over. Sadat says, Walter Mondale writes in his memoirs, that at Camp David he asked Sadat, what brought you to make peace with Israel? He said, I decided I'm tired of Egyptians dying for Arabs. Sadat's genius was, Sadat's chap was, we're not Arabs, we're Egyptians. 5,000 years of Egyptian glory. We built the Sphinx, our ancestors built the Sphinx and the pyramids, while your ancestors were chasing camels in the desert. We are Egyptians. And this, for 40 years, there's been intense hasbara, creating Egyptian pride and Egyptian identity. This was an Egyptian revolution. I don't know if you watched it, if you saw any of it. The flags were Egyptian, the slogans were Egyptian. The few efforts of the Muslim Brotherhood to make it a Muslim revolution, they were stifled and crushed by the crowd. Everything was Egyptian. There are only two countries in the Middle East with mandatory military service for males. Egypt and Israel. In Israel, 55% of males don't serve. 1/4 are very Orthodox. 1/4 are Arabs. Another 5% are mentally defective or lying or don't want to be in the army. 55% don't serve. Egypt has a 93% male military involved service. Only in the Koreas, which are Rum and Sugar, do you have numbers like that on this planet. And that's the only time in their lives when the average Egyptian gets 3 square meals a day. And the army, they do intense effort at hasbara, at propaganda, at socialization, and they create Egyptian pride. You have 2 hours a day of lectures about Egyptian history and Egyptian pride, they say. You can be illiterate, but we'll make you into a proud Egyptian and a good soldier. And if you become an officer, your life is set. The United States gives $1.5 billion a year to Egypt for making peace with Israel, and that much of that money goes to subsidize military lifestyle. You have your own stores, like Kollel stores in Brooklyn. You have your own compounds. Your children go to their own schools. And you are very proud of being an Egyptian. Give me a second to see where we are, because I've been going off notes for a while. Mubarak had one compelling dream, that his son Gamal would replace him as president. In this article in the Jerusalem Report, the consensus was Gamal Mubarak would become, the Mubarak would run last time in 2012, and halfway through the term, he would give up power to Gamal. Yoram Mizrahi of Hebrew University said that Mubarak's dream was to have the Egyptian people dance through the streets of Cairo and Alexandria, chanting Ashir Hashem Ki Gamal Alai. And the generals said no, because the generals in Egypt have veto power. And the generals said no. Do you know that for 6 years Egypt had no vice president? Because for 6 years he's played chicken with his generals. He's demanded Gamal be the vice president. They've said no. Therefore he had no vice president. 6 years he ruled without a vice president, until about a month ago. When he finally had to make his chief defense guy vice president under pressure. Had Mubarak has cancer. Mubarak is 83 years old. Had Mubarak dropped dead in the middle of July, and the military would have announced they're taking over, the middle class would have been furious. The Muslim Brotherhood would have been furious. Instead, the military are the heroes. They dance, they shout, they chanted in Tahrir Square, the army is with the people and the people is with the army. The army validated itself. It vindicated itself. It are the heroes of the revolution. Let's go back to that Facebook page. First, Egypt matters. It was David Ben-Gurion who allegedly said, the Arabs cannot make war without Egypt or peace without Syria. For over 30 years, the Israel southern border has been peaceful. Israel gets at least half, the numbers are classified, of its gas, at least half its natural gas, of its oil, at extremely low prices, set unchanged since 1979. I'm told they're extremely good deal from the Sinai. After all, these were oil and gas fields Israel developed. And Egypt matters because it sets the tone for the Sunni Muslim world. It is the only counterweight today to Wahhabite fanaticism and Shiite radicalism. And it matters because Egypt has the largest and best army in the Middle East. When Anwar Sadat was assassinated, I was in Pat Moynihan's office when he called his friend Menachem Begin. And he said to him, will the peace treaty survive Sadat? Begin had just come back from Sadat's funeral. He said, of course it will survive Sadat. There are 3 tests of the peace treaty. The first is, will it survive me, Begin? Because the next guy in line, Shamir, is against the peace treaty. 2, will it survive an Arab-Israeli war? It has survived 3. And thirdly, will it survive Mubarak? Mubarak was not a coward-carrying member of the ZOA. Mubarak was the Air Force general who launched the surprise attack on Yom Kippur on the state of Israel. Mubarak fought in every war against Israel, in 48 and in 56, in 67 and in 70 and in 73. After 5 wars, Begin said, he and Sadat realized they couldn't defeat us on the field of battle, so they made peace. They got tired of dying, as Sadat said, for Arabs. The next leaders said, Begin may not know that lesson. They may have to learn it again. That is worrisome, and that should worry us. Crane Britton, in his class, anyone ever read The Anatomy of a Revolution? Good, so I can misquote it. Crane Britton, in his classic Anatomy of a Revolution, gives 3 models of revolution. I'm going to give you a 4th today. First, let's do his 3. The first model is Aristotle, Marx, the common model in the third world socialist mold. You know, when revolution comes, things get worse and worse and worse. Workers of the world arise, you have nothing to lose but your chains. Your chains. That's when revolution comes. Revolution comes when I'm mad as hell and I won't take it anymore. Revolution comes when you're squeezed to the point. Folks, the people in Egypt that were being squeezed did not rise up. This was not their revolution. It was a middle-class revolution. Remember that. Secondly, second theory is Plato, de Tocqueville. You know when revolution comes? James Wilson. You know when revolution comes? When things are getting a little better, expectations explode, rise much faster than reality. When did the black ghettos burn in the United States? They burned when the civil rights movement created expectations that were not met, right? The problem with the second theory is it's not exactly what happened in Africa. That's not exactly what happened either. Third theory is Crane Britton's own theory. You know, in revolution, he said he proves the French Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution, things are bad. They're steady, make it a little bit better. Expectations are starting to grow. And then things get worse dramatically. Get a slap in the face. That's the last straw. When Martin Luther King is killed is when the worst riots break out. It's when expectations are dashed, shattered. Tsar Alexander, the good Tsar, followed by terrible pogroms. Jews had gone through the same life in Russia for 500 years. This time they won't take it anymore because expectations have been rising. What am I talking about? From Franklin Roosevelt to Bill Clinton, presidents of the United States took it for granted that the Middle East is run by autocrats. As long as they were our autocrats, we were happy. Nobody preached democracy to the Middle East. Woodrow Wilson had preached democracy, and that was the last president of the United States that tried that trick. George W. Bush changed it. George W. Bush devoted his second term to democracy. He insisted on democratic elections in Iraq. You are an underemployed lawyer in Egypt. You're watching your color. Remember, the have-nots don't have color television. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. You're watching your Al Jazeera on color TV. Iraq has a free election. The Palestinians have a free election. And this is astonishing to you. You know why? Because you've had elections every 4 years in Egypt, and they're rigged. Now, you know this election wasn't rigged because Hamas won. You know the United States didn't want Hamas to win. You know Israel didn't want Hamas to win. You know Al-Fatah didn't want Hamas to win. This is a whole new idea. You're just recovering from this shock when Barack Hussein Obama arrives in Cairo. In Cairo, in your city, in front of your rigged parliament, he gives a dramatic speech about democracy and free elections. How's that for rising expectations? First Bush starts it and Obama builds it up. And then comes the pachin punit, the slap in the face. I'm told by a friend who's from Tunis. Who's heard of Chelm? Heard of Chelm? It's a real town. All Polish Jews made fun of Chelm, except the Chelm they made fun of Luchins. That's the way it works in Poland. It worked in Poland.